For 6 days after Amelia Earhart vanished, radio operators heard desperate messages. Then water sounds. Then silence. The Navy searched 250,000 square miles of ocean and found nothing of. They said she crashed and sank, but the government kept the information secret. Signals were said to be coming from one tiny island. Scientists just figured out those messages sent with new technology. Every sign led them to the same place. Spot, this is the last word on what did Amelia Earhart do, and why? Officials changed the story about Amelia Earhart's story didn't start with planes. It all began in the small town of Aixon in 1897, when she was born into a family that went back and forth between Edwin, her father, worked with money and chaos. As a railroad lawyer but had a hard time with being drunk meant that the family never stayed in one place for a long time. Amy was born into a wealthy family and didn't want to raise her daughters that she wouldn't force Amelia to do it the right way. That one day Amelia will play traditional roles. They could be riding in a horse-drawn carriage at her grandparents' house. The next day she would be trying to forget about her dad's. When people speak out in public, they mix privilege and being unstable gave her grit. Even Amelia had already learned how to keep going. No, she wasn't like the other person no matter what. Girls while they played with dolls, Amelia was outside climbing trees, putting up sled ramps and killing rats with a .22 caliber gun. Her grandmother made her a ramp just for her sled. Was quick, crazy, and dangerous. Just how one day, Amelia took some because she liked it. Planks a crate and put together it hit her on the roller coaster and hurt her. She didn't care about herself, it's like flying, they yelled. The wild streak wasn't a phase, it was the start of something much bigger for her. Her family moved, and she did too. From 1913 to 1916, Amelia went to 16 different high schools in 4 years. Her trip took her from Kansas City to Chicago. Never staying long, always making changes. Most the kids would have given up, but Amelia learned to change quickly and make friends easy and deal with new places with trust. That every new school was a question, but instead of being scared of change, she began to want it. When she graduated from Hyde Park High, she wasn't just interested in school in 1916. About how excited she was to see the world. Then came World War I. Amelia was 20 years old when she made a brave choice, quit the OAN school in Pennsylvania, where she was being trained to look like a lady, and went to Toronto to work in a military hospital. She worked as a nurse's aide at Spadina Hospital, taking 12-hour shifts to care for injured people. It was soldiers and people who had the Spanish flu. Hard, and the injuries were terrible. It was fatal, but she didn't flinch. A lot of women in her shoes wouldn't have. Most women have done it, but Amelia wasn't one of them. She saw courage because she wanted to help. Every day in the soldiers' faces and the pilots who took off for battle, that spirit stayed with her, and everything changed. Amelia went to an air show in December 1920. Hold a pilot show in Long Beach, California. A man named Frank Hawks gave her a short $10 for her to ride in a biplane. Cost a lot for the 10-minute flight thrill at the time, but once they got in, something hit the plane in the air. Reached 300 feet, and Amelia felt something she had never felt before. She knew right away that she had freedom to fly, and nothing else was important. In just 6 she saved $1,000 for months to go on a trip. Lessons, a huge amount for a woman in 1921. She did hard work and drove the gravel truck, found work in a photo studio, took calls, and spent all the money on to take lessons from a woman named Anita. Naughty Snook was only 24 years old and had only having flown for years, but in those the days that made her an old pro planes where there were no safety features. It was dangerous. The engines were running a lot with the cockpits open. Crashed, killing 1 in 6 pilots. Nita had lived through a crash. Amelia didn't land in a haystack. She was hooked. She proved herself fast. On October 22, 1922, with less than 2, Amelia flew again years after her first flight by herself to a height of 14,000 feet. No, the woman had done it before in a she named the Yellow Cur Aster, the Canary. The plane only had 60 horsepower. Could only go 85 miles per hour. It wasn't made for high places. There was oxygen, and the cockpit was big. It was 20 degrees outside, and she was up there. When the engine started to sputter, she didn't turn back. Instead, she pushed. Putting her life at risk for a record. She was almost 3 hours late when she got there. People had to help lift because it was so cold. From the cockpit, she was brave and set her mind on May 16, 1923, when she was only 26 years old, Amelia, the 16th woman in the world to get it wasn't an international pilot's license. It was only paperwork she had to pass. Tests on navigation, weather, and mechanics and the law. She had to fly over strict inspectors from Europe who didn't trust American women pilots. She did a great job putting it together when there were less than 200 women who are licensed to fly in the world. Amelia joined a small group of very smart people, and she did. Many men who had years did it faster. To gain more experience in June 1928, Amelia Earhart was in the news all over the world. The Atlantic Ocean was no longer between her and us. By air, she was the first woman to ever do. She was supposed to do it, but there was a catch. Take off in the plane where she was sitting in the back. Friendship, a Faller plane flown by Wilmer Stoltz and Lewis Gordon, went on the trip. 20 hours and 40 minutes, and then they left beginning at Trepassey Harbour in Newfoundland and reached Burport, Wales, when they got there. A lot of people cheered, and there were parties. A parade and a trip to the White House, but Amelia knew what was really going on. She never even touched the controls. Stoltz did all the flying, he told reporters. I had to because I was just extra stuff like a bag of. She smiled for the cameras, but everyone knew it wasn't right in their hearts. Thought she was a hero, but she hadn't earned it. It wasn't there in her eyes yet, would stay with her until 1932, when she finally flew across the Atlantic by himself. That flight in 1928 was supposed to go even the smallest thing, but it wasn't. Amy was the first person in Amelia's plan. Phipp had a rich woman as a guest who wanted to becoming the first woman to cross. When her family talked to her about because of that, she chose to pay for the trip. In any case, she needed to be with someone else. A woman who looks good and right. Picture George Palmer Putnam. It was a big deal that he had just made a lot of money by helping Charles Lindbergh to sell his autobiography that Lindbergh had written. $250,000 from it, and Putnam sold more than 650,000 copies, so when the guest someone to make her idea a public one. When she called Putnam, he looked for found the right woman. And Earhart at the time, she was just another captain, but she had the looks, the charm, and a quiet confidence that made people want to be around them. Their very first meeting was only, but things changed. They had a lot of common hiking, swimming, and camping. Tennis and golf eventually led Earhart to move. They went to Putnam's house to work. He was still married in a book, but his wife had left to go on a trip with a younger. By 1931, Amelia and Putnam were both men. Got married after Putnam took the flight to work. He knew how to make a name for himself. Helped Amelia write a book called 20 Years 40 Men. Came out in 1928 and was a big hit. But the book was just the start. Putnam set up speaking tours all over the country where he got her endorsement deals, bags for everything. Even Lucky Strike cigarettes. That one didn't go over well at McCall's magazine. Dropped plans to work with. She still got famous because of it getting bigger. In October 1928, just months. Hart was the first after the flight. Woman who edits Cosmopolitan about flying magazine, where she wrote for magazines and newspapers. Even it's her second book, The Fun of It, came out in 1932 and helped her become the world's most famous woman pilot. But Amelia didn't just want to be well known. It was her goal to help other women fly too. In 1929, after having placed in the women's, she got a group of people together for the Air Derby. At that time, there were only a few women pilots. 285 licensed women pilots in the whole U.S. 99 of them signed up, which is how the 199 started. It wasn't just a club. It was a way for women in aviation to get help, a field that was still mostly being used. The 1929 Women's Air Derby was run by men, on where Amelia first started to show how she might be able to beat the press. Called it the Powder Puff Derby to make fun of it. But the race wasn't a joke. it went in California, from Santa Monica to there were stops in Cleveland, Ohio. Places like Phoenix, El Paso, and Fort Worth and St. Louis. It happened over 8 August as some rough days to even get in. Pilots had to fly alone for 100 hours. Time and 25 hours of driving across the country. They also needed 2 licenses to fly, from the business department of the U.S. a second one from the Fédération Aéronautique. In the international 20 women, only 14 made it in. Done with one pilot. Marble Crossan died. Ruth Nichols was hurt in a crash in an accident and had to leave. Some women even blamed others for sabotaging. Earhart had trouble with her propeller as well. Hurt early in the race, officials held all the other competitors to let her fix it, a favor you don't do for other people. People in the air like Poncho Barnes, who crashed after that and still didn't get any help. Amelia pushed through, she came in 5th altogether. Louise Thaden won the race with 20 hours, 19 minutes, and 4 seconds second, but Amelia had already shown she was good. She wasn't just a magazine covers anymore. She was a real rival. When she got out of the plane in Cincinnati and saw a lot of people, 15,000 people, she told them the truth. Women could fly just as well as men. She left on May 20, 1932, from her red Lockheed Vega, took off from Newfoundland, and flew across the Atlantic by itself. She lost 14 hours and 56 minutes. Her altimeter flew through fog and fought on the wings and watched the flames shoot from a broken exhaust pipe. The fuel gauge also broke, but she made it. She got to Northern Ireland and became the first woman to fly by herself. All the way across the Atlantic. She got the Distinguished Flying Cross in August. No woman had done it before her. So hard she pushed herself, she flew by oneself across the whole U.S. from Los Angeles to Newark. Took a long time. She flew for almost 19 hours through high. It was hot, windy, and stormy. It was hard work, but she set a speed record and showed her flight across the Atlantic wasn't. Amelia Earhart was lucky because she already broken records, won prizes, and almost everything a woman could do in aviation, but by 1936 she was bored. She was ready for one last challenge. Would test her to the limit. So she wanted something that no one else had done before. Fly around the world, not by the fastest way, but it goes along the equator. It would be the longest trip around the world ever tried. She wasn't just after in all her glory, she was Alan Earhart mortgaged her future for this dream come true. University helped her get through a research fund, which she used to make a unique plane called a Lockheed Electra 10E. It had extra gas tanks for a long-time flights and was made to fit her exact needs. She publicly denied having any such a plan when the plane got there, but behind closed doors with her husband George Putnam was already getting in touch with what Eleanor Roosevelt did for the state to get help with the mission. The then bad things happened. On March 17, 1937, Amelia and her crew left Oakland and got to Hawaii, set a new record for time. But as they got ready for the second part of every part of the trip to Howland Island, it all fell apart on March 20. At 5:53 a.m. from Luke Field, the weather was calm a moment ago. When the plane took off, it went to the right. Thrown violently out of control, the right will seem to have taken the most damage of the pressure until it broke. Then the plane's left one gave out. It slid on its belly, sending sparks flying as it went around and hit the runway. Very bad damage to the wings, rudder, and engines all wrecked. People debated about stabilizers. What went wrong? Some said a tire blew out. Some people blamed the landing gear, and suggested a pilot mistake, but no one had it was clear that the crash wasn't just a backwards, it was a warning, but hard. And to make things worse, she made a series. When one of her crew comes up with a Harry Manning left the group after the accident, she was only with Fred Noonan. Neither of them knew how to use Morse code. So Earhart took the telegraph key off. She called it dead weight altogether. Getting rid of the antenna that was trailing behind was important for using the 500 kilograms instead. She picked the emergency frequency. Voice radio worked, but voice signals didn't go as far over the Pacific as you can. If something went wrong, she would be alone. She knew Howland Island was almost there. It is only 2 m long and can't be seen from the sky. 1 mile wide and breaking down communication meant Noonan has given up on ever finding it. Was not the safest option. He had a strong worked in the background for Panama knew navigating the stars, but he also had a rumor spread that he had a serious drinking problem for many years. A 1937 police report talked about later in a book said he drank while on the job. Whether it's true or not, Hart knew what a bad name he had. Even hints at issues in a message to her husband saying there were people their problems with fitness and radio misunderstandings. Most people thought she was still talking about Noonan. She chose to move forward once the Electra is fixed. And going back to where she started her journey, this time from Oakland to Miami in May 1937. From there, she started her last world. The first flight on June 1 went to Puerto Rico. Then Asia, then Southeast Asia, then Africa, Asia. By June 17, she had flown non-stop from Carrick, the Red Sea, something no one else did before. It was brave and risky. Exhausting, but the tiredness began to. If you see her in Banduang, she got worms and had to stay home for days. In the meantime, the plane needed more repairs. But she kept going, and by June 29 she reached New Guinea's Ley. That was the last. There was a stop before crossing the Pacific. It would take over me to Howland Island. 18 hours, on July 2 at 10 a.m., began in Ley and was full of people. About 1/100 gallon of gas that should have given them 20 to 24 hours of flight time, but Ley got cooler. The fuel, making it less useful, they most likely lost 30 minutes of air time. Before they even took off, there was the winds. A strong 26 Mayo headwind pushed against them the whole time that turned their journey of 2,556 miles into something not quite 3,100, that was too far away. Too close to Howland Island. The Itasca Coast Guard ship was ready, but in Miami, things went badly once more. Hart had taken away her long-range antenna, so she could no longer pick up ship. Even worse are the signals on the 500 kHz band. It was the wrong frequency that she gave the Itasca. 750 to tumors her plane's safety gear. I couldn't find my way on that high of the Itasca. Could hear her on that frequency voice, but she couldn't hear them at all. At 7:42 a.m. they got one last clear message: "We need to see you, but can't. You're almost out of gas and haven't been able to radio from 1,000 feet up to get in touch with you." Alaska continued to broadcast even after San, but Hearts couldn't hear them. At 8:43 a.m., the radio didn't pick up a word. After more than 20 hours of flight, the last message came in, and we're on the line 157-337 goes north and south. That meant they were going to fly back and forth along the line for navigation to find Howland Island. They were sure they were almost there but couldn't find it. Radio said they had almost no fuel left. Later, experts said that her behavior was odd, that she didn't send enough news. She put it off too long. Transmissions, her gear was breaking down. And so was her spirit. Her last words promised one more message, but it never came. As word got out that she was missing, President Roosevelt asked for a huge look. It turned out to be the most expensive air at the time. It was the largest sea search in U.S. history. For $1 million, or $80 million today, the Navy looked on 9 ships and 66 planes. More than 200,000 square miles of ocean. The battleship USS Colorado launched a float from carriers and planes. The USS Lexington sent out more than 60 planes. The Itasca even tried to burn oil on the surface, make smoke columns, but it didn't help. In 1937, on a hot July afternoon, Ida Clank, who was 15, was sitting on the floor. She was in her Florida home turning the dial on that her family had a radio. Around 3 p.m. stopped, and the voice of a woman came through. "This is Amelia," shaking and desperate. "Hi, my name is Amelia Earhart." Betty froze over and over for the next 3 hours and was shocked to hear the woman on the radio asked for help in an argument with a man who seemed hurt, and they were sometimes confused and fought over the microphone, and sometimes the woman just cried out in fear as water rose around them. Becky took out a notebook she often used for song lyrics and began to write. Everything went dark. The signal came back on, and it had been minutes since her last message. Kept going with it until 6:15 p.m. being aware that she could be the last person who can hear Amelia Earhart alive many years later. Scientists today would show that she hadn't made it up. A research group called TIGAR looked over 120 radio signs were seen in the days after modern tools took away Earhart. Computer simulations of signals, and there were 57 of them that they found were real, not just words or lies. News from Amelia's plane, and they found one place where the signals came from, Nikomoro Island, which was about 350 miles southeast of that. Changed her goal of Howland Island. Earhart didn't understand what it all meant. Her plane went straight into the ocean. Came ashore still on its wheels and stayed there for days. One radio station, the ones closest to the island, said it was clear calling with the name Kaki. As you get farther away from Earhart, the weaker the voice was on those stations, but something was held by the pattern. Is message from Nikomoro. But how did Betty, a Florida teen, heard it from 4,000 meters away? Is the farthest it gets. The strange Earhart radio had two main between 3105 and 6210 kHz, but it also made strong harmonic signals at different frequencies, like echoes. One of those harmonics hit right into the best place to bounce off. They skipped across the sky in the ionosphere. She had a 60-foot wire antenna in her yard, and it just so happened to be tuned just right for those that were skipped. So even though no one meant for her to hear Amelia, physics made it happen. The noise Betty and others heard wasn't just static, it was a nightmare for 6 days, taking place in real time. The first for sure, the signal came in on July 2nd at 6:55 p.m. It was faint, but the coast over the next few days, Guard wrote it down. The messages were easier to understand. Terribly scary. Let me, Betty wrote in knee-deep water. A woman in Canada heard, we can't. Please wait a lot longer, said, still alive? Better hurry up and tell me. Married man, all right. The tide turned during the flood, when their enemy engine that they couldn't send, so they held out until low tide, calling out each July 5th night for a short time. Pretty much every message was about water, where the last message was seen July 9th, and then nothing for 3 years. 1940, something else showed up. A British Gerald was an officer on Nikomoro. It was Gallagher who found a human skull under he found more bones and a bottle in a tree nearby. He found a woman's shoe and an old sex box. Sent the bones to Fiji, where a doctor they were said to belong to a man who closed the case until 2018. A new researcher named Richard Jantz used different ways to compare the sizes of Earhart's body. He found that the bones looked more like the 99% of people in the world. However, the bones were no longer there.